Okay, we're going to talk about number lines and opposites and absolute values today. We're going to combine these two sections together because they're pretty straightforward. So first of all, let me ask you this. How many people have seen a number line before? Raise your hand. Good. How many numbers are there on a number line? Raise your hand. Yes, sir. Yeah, infinitely many. Yeah, you're right. So on a number line, there are of course a whole bunch of numbers, right? Okay, there is a number line, and we could actually group these numbers in certain ways. Of course, we could say, okay, all the numbers left side of 0 are all negative numbers, right? All the numbers right side of 0, all positive, they're all positive. We all know that, okay? So we're going to kind of group these numbers because there's so many numbers on a number line. We're going to kind of categorize them. So if you group them together in a way, okay, so how many people have seen group of numbers this way? 1, 2, 3, 4. And notice I'm using a brace, okay? So I start with 1, and then I go 2, 3, 4, keep going all the way until infinity, okay? And notice I'm not including any of those decimals or fractions there, right? I don't have numbers like 1.2, like 2 over 5, you know what I mean? But like these numbers, so if I want to just group these numbers together, well, we have a name for these numbers. Does anybody know what we call these numbers once we group it this way? Yes, sir. Integers? Almost. Quite. Integers include these numbers, but you guys remember integers actually includes negative numbers too. These are only all positive, right? Yeah, what do you think? A set, yeah. These are set of what sort of numbers? It starts with n, if you remember. It starts with n. Yeah. You're right. These are called natural numbers. If you didn't know, that's fine. Just write them down now and remember. Okay, now. Okay, so there we go. So once we start with 1, and then we keep adding 1 to it, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it goes all the way up to the infinity. These are called natural numbers. Okay. We could also include 0 to this set, and we call it a different name. Anybody know what we call these numbers if we were to group them this way? Is if we start with 0, starts with, yes sir, what do you think? Yeah. Say it again. Rational numbers. Not quite. Rational numbers, we're going to talk about that later. Yeah, they are rational, but if I were just to group them this way, we have a special name. Starts with W. Oh, you want to try it again? What do you think, sir? Yeah, you're right. So these are whole numbers. And I always get confused with natural numbers and whole numbers because the only difference is that whole numbers include 0 and natural numbers do not, right? Natural numbers starts with 1. Anybody see a nice way to remember that whole numbers include 0? Hint. Look at, yeah, what do you think? Yeah, there's an O in whole number. I know it's not 0, but yeah, exactly. See? You see the 0? Oh, I don't know. That helps me. Okay, so because I always get confused, which one has the 0, which one starts with 1? You know what I mean? The whole number, you know, whole WHO. So whole looks like 0. So that's what I did. Okay, and these numbers. This is a very this one we use a lot. These numbers, all the negatives, like so. Basically, it's whole numbers plus all the negative. Yes, man. Yeah. Yeah. Integers. Yes, correct. You're right. So this is what we just talked about, right? Integers. And this is used a lot, okay? Because we use all these negatives and so forth. So these are integers, okay? So right now there are many other ways. So we're gonna just stop here, okay? To how we could you know, this is when we group them this way. There's names. These are the names that you should be aware of, okay? Oh, so then what do we then call all these numbers that includes all these like decimals, right? All the fractions, even the numbers like pi. You know this number pi? It's kind of interesting. It goes on forever without repeating the decimal digit, right? So what do we call all these numbers together? Anybody know? In other words, every numbers on a number line, if we were to include all of those, obviously I cannot write them all, right? That's why I graphed it, right? Can you imagine me writing all? We can't. Okay. So what do you call these numbers? Yes, sir. Rational numbers. Actually, no. It's rational numbers plus all the other numbers that are not rational. Call irrational. What do you think, sir? Real numbers is correct. So every numbers on the number line, when we're referring to these numbers, we say these are real numbers. Okay. So write that down. Next, I'm going to switch gear a little bit. So we could compare numbers, right? That are, yeah. So by the way, what symbol am I using to compare these two numbers, -3 and 7? Yeah, less than. So what do we call these symbols? Less than, greater than, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. Do you know what sort of symbol? Yeah, these are called the. Not quite. No. Yes, sir. Inequalities is correct. So these are. So I'm using inequality symbols to compare these numbers. Can somebody read what it says here with that less than? Yeah. -3 is less than 7. Is this true, class?
Yes.
Yes, it is. It's, you all know that -3 is less than 7, right? What about this? Which one's greater? -3 or -7, class? -3 is greater. So in terms of number line, okay, we sort of know like which one's greater. So when you're comparing two numbers, in terms of number line, what can you tell by number line? So you can see, yes, sir. Whichever is. Yeah, I think. Okay, so for example, if, let's say I graph this, right? There's -3, there's 7. So how do you know which number is greater? Is there a way to tell just by looking at the number line? It's sort of, I guess, too easy. How do you know which one is greater just by looking at the graphs? Yes, sir. Yeah, further to the right, of course, right? As we go further to the right on the number line, right, the number increases. As you go to the left, it decreases. So it's we used to see that -3 is on the left and 7 is on the right of it. Again, this one also works, right? -7 and -3. Which one is on the right? -3 or -7? -3. Therefore, that one's the greater number. Does that make sense? Easy. Somebody said this. Oh, the number that is closer to 0. Is that right? To compare two numbers, which one is greater or smaller? No, of course not. It doesn't work in this case, right? Here's 0 right here, right? Well, -3 is closer to 0 than 7, so it's -3 greater. No, okay. So somebody said that, so I said no, that's not right. How we, if you're wanting to know which one's greater number, you just graph it on the number line, right? And then whichever one is on the right side of it is greater, right? That's obvious, easy. Okay, is that okay? May I move on? All right. Okay, now we're going to, so that was 1.8, okay? Now we're going to go to 1.9. Opposite and absolute value of numbers. That's the topic for section 1.9. So we all know how to do this. Okay, so for example, let's talk about opposite of a number. Okay, and I'm sure everyone could answer this. Okay, so if I give you a number like 4, what would be opposite of 4, everybody? -4. Okay, good. Alright, what about opposite of -7, class? What is it? What's the opposite of -7, everybody? 7. Easy? Okay, what's the opposite of -2.5, everyone? 2.5. Is right, okay. So basically, what are we doing with these numbers? Raise your hand if you see a pattern. Let me do one more. What's the opposite of A? Like, let's say A is some variable. What would be opposite of A? Who haven't I called today? I haven't. Yes, sir. What do you think? -A. So anybody see a pattern? How do you find an opposite of a number? You basically, so it works for all these examples here. What do you guys see? Okay, somebody that haven't. How about yes? How about Aaron? Okay, if it's a positive number, you make it negative, right? If it's a negative number, you make it into a positive number. So sort of algebraically, what are we doing then? How is that? You're exactly right, but what is it? Patty, what do you think? You're just basically multiplying by -1. You're right. So once you multiply -1 by whatever number you have, you get the opposite of that number. Would you all agree? Yes? Okay. So by the way, if you have -a, do you see that invisible 1? Right? Isn't this really -1 times a? How many people see that, right? Okay, raise your hand. Yeah, you see how that's really an invisible 1? So -1, it really means -1 times a. I mean, -a means -1 times a, right? Even though you don't see that 1, it's really there. Are we okay with that? Okay. Good. So you're basically multiplying -1 times a number to get the opposite of the number. Easy. Okay. Let's move on. Oh, I haven't done this one. What about -a? What class? What is the opposite of -a? A. So basically, -a times -1, right? Negative times negative is positive. What about 0? What's the opposite of 0?
0.
Okay. Okay, opposite of 0 is 0. Okay, is 0 positive or negative?
Neither.
It's neither. Very good. All right, let's move on. So hopefully all these are a review for you. So absolute value. There are many ways of thinking about absolute value. One of the way is think of absolute value in terms of, anybody know? What's one of the way? So what do you guys know about absolute value of a number? First of all, I guess as we talk about this, we could think of, yes, what do you think, sir? Yeah, exactly right. So that's actually what it was. It's the distance from 0 to that number, right? On a number line. You could think about it that way. And also, what do you know about absolute value of a number? It's always positive is correct. Good. And does it make sense why it should be always positive? Because we're talking about distance from 0, right? Distance is always positive, right? Have you ever heard of negative distance before? No, there's no negative distance. Okay, distance is always positive, right? If you go somewhere, it's always, you always use energy, right? So you can think of it that way. So absolute value of a number, you could think of it as how far you have to go on a number line from 0 to that number. Okay, so for example, if I'm talking about absolute value of -7, okay, you could think of this as, of course, what is the answer? What's absolute value of -7?
7.
Everybody? 7. Yeah, you all know that because you could, okay. See, I even drew this for you. Absolute value of -7 is, you're asking how far, right? Is -7 away from 0 on the number line? Well, you're 7 units away from 0, aren't you? So the distance from 0 to -7 is 7 units. Therefore, absolute value of 7 is, absolute value of -7 is 7. Does that make sense? Okay. By the way, can absolute value of a number come out to negative at all?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So some people think. Okay. So here's listen to my question carefully. Absolute value of a number, would it ever be negative if you were to take no? But okay, of course you could have all this. I think you're describing all this stuff in front of it, right? Like you could have negative of absolute value of some number. Yeah, then it comes out to be negative. But all I'm saying is this: just the absolute value by itself, would it ever come out to be negative? No. That's what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? Of course, you could add some number to that. You could subtract some number to that, multiply some number to that, right? Or divide to make it into a negative or whatever number you like. But just the absolute value by itself, it is always going to be class what? Positive. Does that make sense? Okay. So this statement is always true, isn't that right? Absolute value of a number is always positive. I'm not talking about all these things that's around it, right? Just the absolute value. So keep that in mind. Okay. Okay. Now, what about absolute value of 8, class? This is easy. 8. Okay. So I have the picture. How far are you away from 0 to 8? 8 units. That's why it's positive 8. Is it negative 8? No. Okay. Some people think, oh, you make negative to a positive, so absolute value of a positive number must be negative. No. We're talking about a distance, okay, from 0 to that number. It's always positive. Okay. Just keep that in mind. Absolute value is always what?
Positive.
Thank you. Okay. Good. All right. Good. So distance, right, is always going to be greater than or equal to 0, right? Can distance be 0? When will distance be 0? It'll be like absolute value of what? Yeah. Yeah, absolute value of 0. Yeah, right? That means how far are you away from 0 to 0? Well, you don't go anywhere, right? You stay in the same place, so distance is 0. So we're going to combine all these things that we just talked about. Opposite of a number, absolute values of a number. And let's do some examples for these, okay? So for example, if I had this example, example 1a. It says simplify negative of 12 minus 11, okay? So it's sort of kind of you could think of this as, when you were, by the way, what does this negative mean, really? Yeah, Claire? Yeah, it means same as multiplying -1 times that thing in the parentheses, right? So basically, you could think of this as -1 times parentheses 12 minus 11, right? In other words, what is asking, what's the opposite of 12 minus 11? You see what I mean? It's the same thing. You could think about it that way. Of course, we all know the answer. What's the answer, class? Yeah, -1. Because we have to follow the order of operation, right? We got to do the grouping symbol first. 12 minus 11 is, of course, 1. And negative of 1, which means -1 times 1, right? Which is -1. Does that make sense? I know that a lot of you could have just done that in your head, but I'm just, sort of going with what we just talked about. I have negative of a number. It means what's the opposite of that number next to it, right? That's what it's talking about. All right. Next, what if I have negative of -3? Again, Of course, a lot of you. What's the answer, everybody? The answer is 3, right? But you could think of this as -1 times -3, right? Opposite of -3, right? You see how I'm thinking about opposite of -3? Because that negative of that number means -1 times it. So you get, of course, 3. What about absolute value of 2.6? It's not 12.61, okay? It's absolute value of 2.6. Class, what's the answer? Oh, I'm sorry, that's 2.6. But I'm going to subtract absolute value of 0.4. So this is the same as what? Okay, go ahead, everybody try. What does this really mean? So absolute value of 2.6 minus absolute value of -0.4. Of course, absolute value of -0.4 is same as 0.4. So you could rewrite this as simply, could you do 2.6 minus 0.4? Isn't that the same thing? Right? Isn't that what they're saying? Once you simplify this absolute value, right? Remember, absolute value of a number is always positive. Therefore, it's 2.6 minus 0.4. Of course, class, what's the answer? 2.2 is correct. Easy? You know? Let's look at then this one here. Everybody go ahead and try. I'll give you time. This is simple also. Absolute value of -246 plus absolute value of 4. Okay? So it just means this. What's the absolute value of -246, class, everyone? 246 plus what's the absolute value of 4? 4. You all know how to add, right? What's the answer? You got it. Now let me give you this one here. This one's kind of interesting. Absolute value of 2 minus 3 divided by 3. Okay, do you guys remember absolute value could be also be thought of as a grouping symbol, right? So, you know, it's as if you have a parentheses inside. So can I just do 2 minus 3 first? Why not? It says 2 minus 3. I know what that is. Isn't that -1? Why can't we do that first? You're right. You can't do that. Yes, sir. We got to follow the order of operation. So sorry. So even if you have absolute value, you have to always follow the order of operation. Okay, it doesn't, right? Order of operation you have to always follow. So what do we need to do first here? How about Samuel? You got to divide first. Is correct. So do you see how absolute value works as if we have a parentheses there, right? By the way, some people think that because we have absolute value, do you see that 2 minus 3? People think that I gotta change that negative into positive number. Is that correct? No. When do we change something to positive? After you simplify everything, then whatever number you get, that's right. If that number, right, that's when you take the absolute value of that number. Does that make sense? Don't make everything inside the absolute value positive. Some people do that. I'm like, oh, that's not the whole point. You have to do all the operation as if you don't have any absolute value, and at the end, once you simplify everything inside, then you take the absolute value. So of course we get here. What do we get here, Jason? So tell me what we get here. We get 2 minus what?
2 minus 1.
And then of course, what's absolute value of 2 minus 1?
1.
Just 1. Is that okay? Easy enough? Right? What if the answer came out to be -1? Then when you take the absolute value of -1, what do you get? Positive 1, right? But this time the number inside the absolute value was positive already, so you don't have to worry about it. Easy? Do you see why we're combining these two sections together? It's very straightforward. Okay. More reviews, okay? Good. This one though is sort of interesting. Now I have this. Absolute value of x equals to 4. It doesn't say 1 times 1, okay? It's the absolute value of x equals to 4. Now this problem, I should write this down. Think about it. This one is a little bit different than all the example from example 1. How is this sort of different than the previous example? A lot of people see it. Royce, what do you think? Oh, you think there are going to be 2 answers? Okay, all right. You're right. In this case, there will be 2 answers. How else is this then different from previous ones that we had? Somebody that I haven't picked. Carly, what do you think? There's a variable. Do you see how all the other ones didn't have any variables? Okay, right? So that's good. All right. Now, what else is also? There's actually one more thing that you should be aware of. Chris, you see something that's different? This is an equation. What do we have in example 1? A through E. Those were all expressions, correct. Now we have an equation. What do we do with the equation? We solve. And when we mean, okay, since we have an equation, we solve. And when we solve, we're looking for every possible single answer we could figure it, right? That will work, right? So, some of you mentioned that there should be two answers. You're exactly right. And you might see what the value of x that we could plug in so that this would always come out to be true. Okay, a lot of you? Okay, okay, go ahead. With your groups, go ahead and see if you guys agree. Go ahead. What are the two answers that we could actually use? Go ahead. Okay, what are the two answers? How about Lynette? 4, -4 is correct. Right? Look, think about it. What's absolute value of 4, class? 4, it makes it true, doesn't it? What about if I plug in -4? What's the absolute value of -4? It's also 4. So that's good that you guys realize that there are two possible ways for this to be true, right? So you could either write it like this, x equals to 4 or x equals to -4, or you could put them into a set notation like this, in a brace, -4, comma 4. It means the same thing, okay? And of course we could check, you could plug it in, you know, they all both become. Yes sir, question 4. Oh, good question. Could we write x equals to positive or -4? The answer is yeah, but I don't want you to do it. It's because people think that when I write x equals to negative or positive 4, they think it's one number. Can a number be positive or negative at the same time? No. Okay. So that's why I want you to at this point just separate them. Okay. Know that there are two answers, so that you don't get confused with that notation. Okay. Easy enough. Do you think we'll always get two answers for these absolute value problems? No? Some people, yeah. Okay, let's look at this next example. Here, why don't you write this one down? Absolute value of x equals to -5. Again, it doesn't say 1 times 1. Okay. Absolute value of x equals to -5. Go ahead. I'll give you time. And if you think you have the answer, share it with your group. Another member that's done already. Go ahead. What do you think about this one? Go ahead. Everybody's try. Okay, how many group have come up with a solution? What number can I plug in? How about Eric? What do you think?
No solution.
Oh, you think? What do you mean by no solution?
Nothing.
Nothing will work. Is that what you mean? Okay, no solution. Good. Oh, Libby, what did you get? Well, I'm sorry. Christina, right? I'm sorry. Okay, how many people got, if I put a negative outside of the absolute value, right, wouldn't this work? Yeah, but when you, actually the answer is no solution. Okay, but some of you say, well, why don't we just put a negative outside a box, right? So why don't we do something like this, negative, like, here, if I do this, don't I get -5? You know what I mean? Is that what you're talking about? Oh, okay. Since there isn't one, you're exactly right. So some people think, oh, let's just put a negative outside, then x equals to 5 or -5 will work. But I'm like, well, that's not the question I'm asking. You can't change the equation. You know what I'm talking about? Okay, good, very good. So I should have listened to you all the way. So you're right. So some people might say, well, let's stick a negative in front of the absolute value. Well, you can't do that because you can't. Then you're just changing the problem. Does that make sense? Yeah. So as it is, there is no such number. Can you think of any number that you could plug in here so that when you take the absolute value of it, it becomes negative? No, there is no such number. Does that make sense? So Christina, you're right. Okay, you're right. All right, let's move on to then example 3b. I think you might like this one then. What if I did this? What if I now, these two are two different problems. Okay, go ahead, everybody try. What if I have negative of absolute value of x equals to -5? Then, does this work? Go ahead, everybody try. I'll move it up for you, okay? If you want to, yeah. If you can, that'd be good. Go ahead. What do you guys think? Go ahead. Go ahead. Talk with your group. I'll give you time. Go ahead. So, okay. Who has the answer? How about I want to ask Eunice. What'd you get? X equals to 5 or? You're right. There are two possible ways, right? Because if I plug in 5, because you have a negative outside, right? Wouldn't it become -5? or you could plug in negative 5 inside. Absolute value of negative 5 is still 5, but you're going to have to multiply that by negative 1. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Right? So there are two ways. So you could just by checking, you could plug it in. What's another way to actually solve this sort of thing? Could I multiply both sides by something to make it easy for ourselves? Dana, what do you think? Yeah, could I multiply both sides by negative 1? Is that okay to do if we have an equation? Yeah, that's fine. You can multiply both sides by the same number, okay, to an equation. Then when you do it, you just get absolute value of x equals to 5, which is something we did already, right? And as you can see, the answer is negative 5 over 5. Any question there? Do you guys see the difference between 3a and 3b example? You guys get that? Yeah. So when you look at 3a, you can't just put a negative in an equation, okay? Because then you're creating another problem. You're making a new problem, okay? So you can't do that, okay? And here's our last example for the day. What about absolute value of x equals to 0? What about absolute value of x equals to 0? What do you guys think? This is pretty straightforward. Okay, who thinks they have the answer for this one? Who haven't I called today? How about Aiden? What do you think? 0 is right, guys. Are there any other number other than 0 that you could plug in? No. Okay. Does that make sense? So in summary, why do you think I gave you all this example 2, 3, and 4 together? With the absolute value problem, okay, how many solutions are possible?
2.
You could either get 2, is that the only possible way? You could also get 1, or you could get 0, which means no solution. Don't write 0 don't write 0, because guess what that means when you write 0? That means, yeah, the answer is 0. Okay, so you need to write no solution, just like someone said before. You guys get that? So with the absolute value problem, please remember, let's say, okay, you could have how many solutions? 2, 1, or no solution. Is this clear? All right. So write that down on your piece of paper. I want you to at the end write it down. With absolute value problems, okay, I'll write it too. Give me a sec. So here we go. So the solution to absolute value problems, there can be 2 solutions, right? When absolute value of x equals some positive number. When do you get 1 solution? When absolute value of x equals to what? 0. That's the only time, right? When do we get no solution? When absolute value of x equals to negative. Does that make sense, guys? Do you see what we're trying to do here? What we're trying to show you? Okay, good. Okay.